wide array of perspectives. This series was cultivated with staff and volunteers in AARP Tennessee and AARP Virginia. It was informed by professionals in the field of aging and community and economic development, and was actively planned by volunteers and staff with our many various community partners, including Land of Sky Regional Council here in Asheville, North Carolina. And now we want each of you to be an active part of the knowledge shared and the information gained. You came to this session for a reason, and you can help to ensure that you get the most out of it by actively participating. So please use that chat function to get to know the other attendees. Take a moment right now and share your name, your organizational affiliation, if you have one, and what you hope to gain from today's session. If you were at an in-person conference, you would talk to your fellow attendees and develop new ideas and relationships, and probably share a business card. So use that chat function to do that today. Also use the chat function to share any aha moments. We will also be putting important information into the chat, including presenter contact information and various links. So note that you cannot copy and paste from chat. So make sure you have your cell phone available so you can take a picture of anything that you want to recall later. If you have questions or comments for our presenters, use the Q&A function. This will help our moderator, Alan Briggs, to do his best to make sure questions and comments are addressed. Now, we have an amazing lineup of speakers for you today, and you will leave here learning something new. You can see the lineup of speakers on the screen now, and each will introduce themselves a little more fully after a short intro from the moderator. But before we jump into our keynote presentation, let's learn a bit more about your interests and needs. Here is the response to the poll question that was on the screen when we started. Looks like accessible housing was the #1 barrier that was chosen. Again, if you have an aha moment about this, put it in the chat. And also, if you didn't get a chance to answer that poll question, please use that chat function to do so. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce David Lipsetz, President and CEO of the Housing Assistance Council. David, take it away.
Thanks, Leanne and Rebecca. Really appreciate it. So when the cow walked up to the weekly meeting, got on at Zoom, what did everybody say to it? I'm sorry, you're muted. Hey, Leanne, I've been there a few times, so you have to pardon any technical stuff that I bump into today, but I'm going to try really hard to give you a presentation that has quite a bit of information in it. So hopefully, am I sharing screen yet, Rebecca?
You have the capacity to share the screen, but
right,
it's not
here we
showing
go.
quite yet. Yeah, got it.
Got it? Great. Well, despite bad dad jokes and all that, I do want to introduce myself. I'm David Lipsetz, CEO for the Housing Assistance Council. For the last 50 years, our organization has been helping build homes and communities all across rural America. And so part of this presentation, it's going to be a little long on problems and short on solutions, but I hope you find in the work we're doing in this presentation with the local partners here that we can really drill down into very specific ways in which you can help build out some affordable housing. It can be done. I saw some of that go by in the chat, and I get you. It's hard. This is long game stuff. It ain't easy, but an important part of building a vibrant community is building homes that people can afford, that are decent, give them a good quality of life. So let me see if I can get this presentation to roll. So that's us. I said a bit about us. I will say that we were founded way back when in the war on poverty with a federal grant. And as we celebrate 50 years of history, look, I can see the same kinds of conversations happening just over there on Capitol Hill. I'm in DC, sorry. same kind of conversation happening right now as we look to establish programs in infrastructure and other areas so as to try to build up the resources we have. One of the best resources my organization thinks is the folks that are on the line, right? So all that we do is focused on building up the capacity of a local organization. We got folks stationed all across the country. We are giving training, technical assistance. We're a lender. I'll talk a little bit today about CDFIs, Community Development Financial Institutions. So you can come to us for a loan. We do a whole bunch of research and information stuff, and we do all that so as to help build up local organizations. Now, we can't be everywhere all the time. There are lots of groups like ours, but I'll talk specifically about what we're doing and our specific focus, because I think the reason that Leanne and Rebecca and I bumped into each other is my organization does focus pretty squarely on the most persistently poor places in the country. We may be in all rural places, but we're along the southwest border, Colonias, Mississippi Delta, and farm worker communities, tribal lands, and very specifically Appalachia. You know, before COVID and all this, actually, was it during? Yeah, so I've been down a couple times to Western North Carolina over the last year for work purposes, was down on the Clinch River just before the pandemic hit. We have a lot of friends in that area, but if you haven't gotten to know us yet, please give me a call. I'm sure my information ends up in the chat there. Last year, we did $2.5 million of business just in Appalachia. Of the 30 plus million we did across the country, produced or rehabilitated over 100 houses. So we are really deeply committed to the region and look forward to deepening those relationships with y'all. It looks like I'm jumping ahead of every one of my slides, so I'll get past that one quick, and I'm sure the slide deck will end up in everybody's mailbox. So one of the things that I'll tell you, you'll probably think is familiar, you'll see it in your own work, but housing affordability is intricately linked to poverty. We know that. As a bunch of practitioners who are trying to do this work. You got over 10 million folks in rural America who are living in poverty, and that is producing more than a quarter, it produces conditions for more than a quarter of the kids are growing up in poverty. We're about to add to this slide, if you look at the bottom left corner there, you can see that we're about to add the 2020 numbers. We do this as an every 20-year thing after the census information comes out. And you can see we have hit declines. We know how to address poverty in this country. It's an amount of resources and concentration and effort that's going to get us to continue to reduce those amounts that you see in here that are plaguing communities all across the country. But my organization focuses on small towns and rural places, and you can see it here in this slide. There are 430, I think, a little less than that, counties where there's a poverty rate over 20% for 3 census in a row. That's a whole bunch, y'all. And a lot of those are concentrated in rural places. 86% of the persistent poverty counties are in rural places. And so it's really, you know, like I said when I started, I'm going to talk to you a lot about some issues today, and we got to get to some answers. But the reality is a lot of our conversation, despite how vibrant and interesting and full and rich opportunity places that I grew up and that you're working in we are also plagued by some deep and persistent poverty. So a main piece of that for most families, housing is their largest expense. if the affordability of the housing you're in is at or above 30% of your income, then it's going to start eating into what do I have to get some, get a car to get back and forth to work, get schooling for my kids, food on the table. And the more and more it eats into that other 70% of your income, it becomes a real challenge. For a lot of our work, we're working with folks on fixed incomes. I'm sure you are too. Elderly, disabled households, and boy, once housing starts to eat into a fixed income, it becomes a serious problem moving forward. All right, so as I showed also in that previous slide, where we have been able to address a fair amount of issues surrounding poverty, housing, on the other hand, has gotten significantly worse as an affordability issue across the country. And we feel it, we hear it, the way Leanne introduced the idea that when they're taking calls, almost always somebody says a housing issue. That's because it's an area of driving poverty that we have not addressed well across the country. And I'd stop for a moment to say that it's really deeply felt in a bunch of the rural places that we're working. So North Carolina, 1 in 3 rural families is paying more than that 30% threshold. 1 in 7 pays more than half of their income in housing. And the challenge there becomes for all of us to be able to stop for a moment, try to develop an affordable resource for them, knowing that every day, today, we need to concentrate as many resources as we can on getting that food on the table and the electric bill paid. When we're talking about the choices they make, it really pulls the heartstrings. And so, I guess maybe here today, I'm trying to encourage you to join my crusade for concentrating resources on housing. When you have that context around you as well, if your community itself is facing such levels of poverty, then you're going to face some issues with the actual ability to get capital to build housing, a workforce to build it, a population ready to come in and be housing ready. There are conditions out there we're trying to address right away, like the things about the actual housing itself. So I want to make sure this conversation isn't just about building new. We're doing a bunch of rehab. There are over 10,000 rural families just in Virginia, Tennessee, and North Carolina who don't have complete plumbing. And that's an unacceptable level of development. So we have programs that I'll talk about here in the presentation to try to address that as well. So putting that bigger context in place is something we're trying to do with our work that we're doing on the ground that I described here in DC. So we are trying to take this message up to Capitol Hill to the administration, whomever's in place, and talk to them about how some of these choices are made in policy. And they're often made with the best of intentions, right? We're trying really hard. Actually, let me try an audible here. I can flip over that. Let's see here. I was just looking at something this morning that maybe would be interesting for folks. So hopefully you can see that. Just take a look at one of the core elements of our housing programs. We offer homeowners a mortgage interest deduction, and we spend about $70 billion a year on this as a country. It is bigger than public housing and vouchers and affordable development, all the other programs. You add them up together, it doesn't equal the amount of resources we spend as a country on giving folks an interest deduction on the home they own. And look at the geography of the way this plays out, right? This drives me crazy that we're spending that money in areas that you can see are heavily populated down the coasts, and then you'll hit some big urban centers across places that we're working all the time. I mean, look at those big blue swaths there across Tennessee. You're a big long state, right? You know that, and you can see from side to side there that we're talking about less than 10% of the folks who own a home are able to file for this resource. So I'm just trying to make the point here that we're making lots of housing choices now and today in our federal policy. And when we're making them like this, when the core elements of our housing policy redistribute wealth in this way, in a way that's opposite to serving the most persistently poor, well, that drives me a little crazy. And maybe you as well. I'll send around that slide because it's one of my favorites. So here, you'll have to pardon me trying the Audible there. See if I can't get back to the PowerPoint. How'd I do? Give me a thumbs up in the chat if I got there. All right.
You got it.
All right. Good stuff. So let's see which slide I'm on here. All right. You can tell I'm a real whiz at this Zoom. So we can't pretend, of course, that housing affordability is the only question, as much as I might have focused on that at the beginning. There simply aren't enough homes to rent. We know that incomes are lagging expenses. Construction costs, especially during the pandemic, have risen significantly. You know, you hear news about supply chain issues every night on the news these days. And what that means for us is at the border for US and Canada, there are significant delays in getting lumber into the United States, or you go out and try to buy lumber to build your next house, and it's significantly more expensive than it was. That to me is the way when I hear supply chain in the news, that's exactly what I'm thinking of. Or the containers in the Western ports full of imports from Asia that are fixtures for the bathroom and tiles for the roof. We're spending more and more on those, getting us thus less and less housing units. We also have some workplace issues of trying to attract plumbers and electricians, home inspectors in rural places. These are things we need to, as communities, address. So I think there's an underlying factor here as well that almost 40% of rural homes have someone who's 50 years or older in them. We're talking about an aging population, and the needs in the home itself are actually far different at that age. So it's hard to have this conversation, of course, nowadays without talking about the impact of COVID-19. And we on our spare time have been tracking quite a bit of health data, just trying to inform folks as well. It has dramatically increased housing insecurity in rural America. At its height, over 15% of renters had no confidence in survey data, in their ability to make next month's rent payments. Over 20% of the renters were behind on their rent, as reported in survey data. It's true for homeowners as well. 12% of them were behind on their mortgage in rural places. This is tens of millions of families. And for us, a lot of times my organization not dealing directly with the family. We're working with organizations like yours who oftentimes own the property itself. And in the declining income that those previous statistics created, it made it harder and harder for the landlords and owners who are running this property. And so we have gone to great lengths to defer payments, allow you to stop paying for a while, put that on the end of the mortgage, all kinds of ways in which we're trying to help you manage the finances for the property. And I know a lot of our peers are doing that as well. All right, so I am I'm going to skip through a couple of these pretty quick because I'm tired of talking about problems here, y'all. I'd really like to spend some time talking about the solutions that we see. So let's take a minute on this slide. That there are resources out there, and U.S. Department of Agriculture is a big one. So get yourself I know you're on Zoom, right? So you're sitting in front of your computer, tired of listening to my stats about how tough it is. Let's go look at the solution. Pull up a browser and go to USDA's rural development site. Shoot, I could probably do that too. I'll show it to you, just maybe. Yeah, here we go. So you can go on, you see the address here up top, hopefully in the screen, and you can scroll down through this page and find a significant number of programs to help that are squarely focused on small towns. And so you can see these housing programs that I'm showing here. Boy, you click in here and you can find that they actually have programs that are going to help you rehabilitate homes. There's a self-help housing program. And I know later in the presentation, we're going to see the presentation on Appalachia Service Project using programs like this. So there are folks around the region who are doing it. Get yourself on here, try to find what your need is, click through it. And then when you get lost in the website, while you call me, because I spend probably way too much time in here digging through to find what the programs look like. But you can, even for your own organization, heck, if you want a to-do that walks away from this, make sure your own organization is healthier. Go right to this page, go down there to the direct home loan thing and find if any of your staff, the folks who are cleaning the building you work in or answering the phones or any of that stuff, they probably qualify for one of these direct home loans, which will give you 103% of the purchase price of the house with a low credit score. That means the purchase price plus fees, and and they'll cover for a low credit score, and you can get your staff into stable housing as well through that program, so that you're better when you walk back out the door to serve your community. So let me swing back. All right. So you see some of that listed here in the home ownership programs, the repair and rehab programs as well, and you will undoubtedly have conversation about multiple unit housing where you have existing units in your community that need help, or you're trying to build new. USDA has programs for that. Now, what do you need to do to be able to use those programs? It's more than just get familiar with them, right? It is get yourself an organization in your community that knows how to build housing and is going to be good in helping you focus on these programs. And how you do that is through an organization like mine or a CDFI, Community Development Financial Institution, founded and working in your community, that's going to help bring in capital, address the problems with programs like this, and get you moving on active projects. How do you do that? Well, call me. We probably bumped into every rural housing organization there is in one way or another, and I can get you a reference in your small town, but also look and ask around for those organizations which are able to access the federal funds that come along with being a CDFI. If that's foreign language to you, well, then you're not alone. Most folks have been looking for that kind of help in their community and not finding an open door for that kind of help. So if that's you and that's your case, well, then we got to talk again, because there are ways to found those organizations, and myself, or our organization, and several other intermediaries of our sort are going to help you put that organization together and continue to keep them sustained so that they are there working on these programs and giving you a hand every day, day in, day out. We've got some other resources at the Housing Assistance Council that, oh boy, more problems, not enough solutions. So I want to talk about some of the other resources that we have, and folks, you'll have access to this presentation, so you can go look at some of those slides on the things that we're facing to try to address with these tools and resources. But if you have a specific community that you're looking at, and you need to be able to make the case for the construction or rehabilitation of housing to either your banks, your lenders, your community itself, to your elected, then take a jump over to the Rural Data Portal, which I hope you find is really pretty easy to use for us, from us. One more time, I'm going to try to jump over. All right, to here. So, all right. Well, here you go. So you can jump right on here, ruraldataportal.org. Boy, click your state. Look, North Carolina must have been from the last time I was in here. Pick out any of these things that you need to analyze, and you'll immediately take the housing data and give it all to me. So here you go, can make the case quickly for you. Hopefully, you can also do it as well off the maps themselves to get quick snapshots of information. All right, we have the same kind of thing, Veterans Data Central. You know, yesterday's concentration on the service of folks who, for the country of veterans, is one of the best days of the year for us at HAC. We do a ton of work very specifically with veteran communities in rehabilitating homes and building more. We also put it all out in data, so go on over if you can to veteransdata.info, and you know, it's quick and easy to get yourself specific information on how many veterans are in your state, what that looks like across county, or you can dig down in and be able to draw. Again, we just put it right into a table for you with a quick click that hopefully will allow you to be able to go to make the case of how important this stuff is. All right, do I have anything else up here? All right, so us, we are at ruralhome.org. Take a look at our website. Here's training and technical assistance that we deliver. We're also gonna, if you come in with an actual project, you want to find a borrower whose rates are the best around, we can do that for all kinds of different ways. If you come in here. So let me close up with just saying, that you know, I really appreciate your patience with me trying to flip around and show stuff. I think it's hard to do this in Zoom. I'd rather we were sitting around the room in a circle, passing those business cards back and forth, as Rebecca mentioned. But absent doing that, please, I know it feels hard some days, but pick up the phone and call. Shoot me an email. Let's have this conversation specific to your community and to how we can move this forward. There are a lot of groups doing this work. The Housing Development Alliance is one we work with all the time in Appalachia. FAHI, used to be the Federation of Appalachian Housing Enterprises, are just two. But though I can get you direct contact with those folks, and they can help you go through the complexity of developing housing for these communities. So, you know, and smarter people than me have been doing this work their entire careers, and we're still in a pickle for this stuff, but boy, have they figured out a couple of good ways to be able to move us forward. So let's get you in touch with them. Housing at the end of the day is an important part of building up our communities. And we want you to grow old and pass on to future generations the resource that housing can be, so that we can have more vibrant and viable rural communities in which to live. So with that, I think I'll pause for any questions. If anybody wants to go down into some specifics of this work, and myself look forward to hearing the lessons from on the ground actual work of the practitioners who are on this call. So thank you for that.
Thank you, David. Thank you, David. That was really great. I appreciate that you have highlighted that there's no one single solution, and that there are many, many aspects to the housing issues that we're addressing today. If you noticed in our poll question, the maintenance, affordability, and accessibility all came in pretty much even in terms of the challenges. So appreciate you being honest that you have added some tools to our toolbox, but we all need to collaborate together and emphasize that, sharing that information, sharing ideas and approaches. I'm Alan Briggs, a volunteer with AARP North Carolina. I'm going to moderate a few questions in the second half of our program. So David, one of the questions that came up was the Older Americans Act doesn't currently have a lot of tools available to address transportation and some of the other related issues. And the question came in, are there efforts at the federal level to expand the programs and activities under the Act?
So there are a significant number of things happening right now in DC. I hope folks are watching those headlines. The new administration has come in with a real focus on our social and human infrastructure, as well as the physical infrastructure. Much of what was included in the physical infrastructure initiatives passed just this last week by both houses of Congress, and it's hitting the president's desk. And in there, communities are going to start to find a lot more of the resources that we need to make sure the curb cuts are in place and the transportation programs are running. The human infrastructure parts of what are being considered are still being fought over in Congress, and those programs that are in there are going to be able to significantly increase the amount of housing resources we have, and be able to bring the capacity building that we're talking about into place with a thing called the Rural Partnership Program that's in there, which is about $1 billion worth of the work that we're doing right here today. These kinds of delivering information, connections, technical assistance that never ends up in that account that says, here's some more money for sidewalks. It's really this kind of work. So I'm hoping over this next year, we see a whole lot more of that federal investment in the kinds of work that we all do every day. I would note there one of the programs, and we can get down into a little bit more, that was on one of those slides, the 504 program at USDA, Rural Development, Rural Housing Service, is a specific grant and loan project for fairly small scale rehab. And you can literally get there and get enough in a grant to put a ramp on the front of a house through that program. If you get in touch with your rural development office, they'll help you walk through how you can do that.
I think we all were appreciative of those programs, and at least for me, I wasn't aware that the Department of Agriculture was that engaged, and I think that's a great resource. And a couple of our participants raised the question of, as often happens in rural Appalachia, what happens when you have the house with one owner, but the land itself is with a different owner? Do those programs address that and still allow for loans in those situations?
Oftentimes, what you need to be able to do for the ownership of the property is almost always have control of the land. However, there are programs at USDA and that we use some of that capital that I described through being a CDFI to help when it is manufactured housing. And so, there are a significant number of units across Appalachia that are not titled with the land itself, and they're often manufactured housing. And there is a way to convert that to resident ownership. And so it's, I know there's at least one organization that's active in the region called Rock USA, and we do lending with them as well to be able to help turn those mobile home parks into resident-owned communities. And that's going to significantly help the folks who live there hold on to the land and get the prices and utility and the services and all that under their control. So there are some ways to do that. And I'm happy if you put me in touch with a specific person here to dig down into that a little further.
Oh, that's great. Actually, you provided a really good segue along with one of the other questions that had come in about inquiring about those public-private partnerships that we know are so important in this. And I don't know if you have a quick comment on that, but I will assure our participants that actually we do have some presenters coming up shortly who will talk about some of those partnerships. And actually we'll address, David, that the conversion of the mobile home parks as a specific activity. So with that, if Raphael, our little wizard behind the curtain, is ready, we've got a short video that's talking about one of the private interventions working in the community to improve housing. And then we'll also touch on the mobile home conversion in the upcoming panel.
I would say that above all else, we have a social responsibility. We have a human responsibility. If we're blessed with homes that are warm, dry, we have neighbors that aren't. And if we have any capability, even if it's just coming in and sweeping floors, we should be giving back to help our neighbors.
ASP is really excited to be able to have this year-round presence in the Tri-Cities and give people an opportunity to give back to their neighbors and community members locally. The Tri-Cities Repair Program serves Washington, Carter, Unicoi, Sullivan, Greene, and Hawkins County. We do all kinds of home repair, floor repair, wall repair, new windows and doors, plumbing, electrical, roofs, and heat systems through our funding.
This is Annie Pearl Lewis, and we are working on her bedroom today, trying to get the floor finished, so that way she has somewhere safe to play. It means the world to me to have ASP here to help us, because otherwise I would not be able to do this at all.
We'd love to get you to come serve with the Tri-Cities Repair Program in your local community. You can do it at no cost to you. In order to get involved as a volunteer, you can go to asphome.org/TRI.
Okay, David, sorry about this little glitch right here. We'll be going ahead and bringing in our moderator here. And Raphael, if you can take the spotlight off of David. Thank you. Okay. And there's Alan again. Alan, you're muted.
There we go. I guess I was muted, David. As we move into the panelists, we're really tickled to have our first panelist to lead off this session, Mayor Curtis Hayes from Livingston, Tennessee. Mayor, I was struck by a comment you made recently that I wanted to share with folks. You said, being in an aging community, it is more important than ever that we take a serious look at age-friendly housing. So, Mr. Mayor, we're tickled to have you here this morning. We appreciate your time here. And I think that you're already seeing the theme of community come through. And I think in Livingston, you have a great example of how the communities come together to address this. So without further ado, Mayor Curtis Hayes.
Well, thank you. And thank you for the nice introduction there, Mr. Briggs. I am Curtis Hayes, Mayor of Livingston. Been the mayor now 15 years. So I'm on my fifth term. All right, I'm trying to hit all these buttons here. So being an aging community as Livingston, Tennessee is, it is more important now more than ever that we take a serious look at our age-friendly housing. Oftentimes, folks build their homes and plan to live in it until the day they die. But when their significant others passes from this life, this creates an issue for the one left behind. Now they find themselves in a 2,000 plus square foot home, possibly multi-level home where aging makes it tough to be mobile. This creates a demand for more age-friendly housings that is ADA compliant in one level. I want people to be able to live out their lives in Livingston, and as the mayor, have made it a goal to find a way to make that happen. So we determined the need for seniors just simply due to the consistent phone calls of the 55 or older group, or perhaps one that fell in the category where they have lost a loved one. Consistent calls, folks 55 and older that have a large home that live by themselves. The house is just simply too big, but are looking to downsize and more importantly, a one-level home. So we had a planning session. I'll tell you who participated in the planning. We did a strategic plan on Livingston in 2012 called Livingston Vision 2035. This was a comprehensive plan on how we wanted Livingston to look in 20 years. There was input from the general public, which was invited 4 consecutive Saturdays in a row. The University of Tennessee moderated along with Tennessee Tech University. While implementing the Vision 2035, the town of Livingston worked with the Livingston, Overton County Chamber of Commerce, city officials, the Board of Education, the Overton County Commission to send out surveys asking how we can make a Livingston more livable, more age-friendly community. Information who will manage the implementation of the plan and the plan reach out or go. The town of Livingston is striving to reach the goal of being a better age-friendly community by forming a 7-member committee under my direction, sending out surveys, reviewing and studying the surveys, defining exactly what actions need to be took, reach our goals of affordable housing for our aging community. So the strategic plan is already in process. The committee has been formed and has met. We will be meeting with contractors. We've joined hands with the county, with the school board, and believe it or not, it matters, with the Board of Education, with youth, as you've seen in the first slide about having a healthy home. So we are in the process of putting this plan together, like I said, with several folks in the private sector would join hands with. I'll be happy to answer any questions if there is any.
That's great. We're going to come back with Q&A at the end, but Mr. Mayor, just real quickly, we do have another moment. You've emphasized how local communities can get involved. David was talking about their activity, their advocacy on the Hill and with federal programs, but could you just make a quick note about how important it is for us to play a role engaging at the town and county level to see that these programs and improvements are made?
Well, I think we're stronger together. I just simply think that we're stronger together. And when you, each branch of government on the local level has seen this. They've seen it where it's a principal at the local high school level or middle school level, whether it is the local housing authority, when their availability is there's no vacancies there. So it is important for us to join hands, all the government, put our heads together and reach out to the private sector. We're just stronger together, simply put. We're just simply stronger together and trying to get the folks at the table that needs to have a seat at the table. You know, you're smarter, you're bigger, and you're stronger together.
Well, I think that's a great takeaway. We're stronger together, and that we hopefully we'll all go out and take on our appropriate role. It came up earlier. I want to introduce our next panelist. Joy Strassel is Executive Director of the Western North Carolina Housing Partnership. And you're going to make a lot of folks really happy here because you can talk about money. We all talk about these needs, but funding is such a vital component of our work. So Joy, thanks for being with us.
Well, thank you. And I do have a presentation that will be starting very shortly. Good morning, everyone. My name is Joy Strassel. I'm the Executive Director of the Western North Carolina Housing Partnership. We focus solely on rural areas of Western North Carolina. We stay out of areas that are tied to a metropolitan statistical area. And we kind of go where no one has gone before in some of our counties. As an example, right now, we received a tax credit award in Murphy, North Carolina. For those of you from North Carolina, you know how far out that is. And no housing has been built there, and over affordable housing has been built there in more than 30 years. So we're excited. But Western North Carolina Housing Partnership, we're celebrating 27 years now. And we're a nonprofit organization founded in 1994. We've developed more than 20 affordable apartment communities in rural areas of Western North Carolina. Majority of our portfolio is housing for the 55 plus community. And we definitely look at needs-based affordable housing. Where are the greatest needs? And we've certainly identified the greatest needs that we see are in rural Western North Carolina. We utilize tax credits that are issued by the U.S. Treasury, and it's known as low-income housing tax credits, or LIHTC, to fund our apartment developments. Next slide. Housing insecurity is second only to food insecurity. Affordable housing is defined as paying no more than 30% of your income toward housing. By utilizing LIHTC, we're able to offer rents at 50, 60, and 80% of the area median income. And those rents typically range from about $450 to about $725. A recent housing study that was just published last month, specifically for rural Western North Carolina, found that there is demand and need for more than 4,000 affordable senior units in Western North Carolina. And that was from Bowen National Research. So I wanted to show you all a photo of a community we built, a 50-unit, 55-plus apartment community in Lenoir. And our building designs are very much built for creating a sense of community, but we also build communities that are completely indistinguishable from market rate housing. So barriers to entry, and David talked a bit about this, suitable land availability and soaring land costs. We just cannot believe how much land has gone up. Identifying a site that meets the stringent requirements of the North Carolina Housing Finance Agency Qualified Application Plan. That's quite a mouthful to say. The housing agency disperses the federal tax credits to the developers, and every state has a housing finance agency. I do want to mention too, in the nchfa.com website, you should be able to find a list there of all the affordable apartment housing in North Carolina. You have to kind of negotiate the site. One of the other challenges we see certainly is lack of infrastructure in some of our more rural areas. And as David commented, construction costs have just gone through the roof. We've seen lumber up 25, 30%. Tradesmen are costing, 20% or more. We have seen lumber come down a little bit, but it is a huge challenge right now with what has happened during COVID and as we are attempting to break ground. So LIHTC source of funding, we think, is one of the best vehicles to fund affordable housing communities, but only 18%, equating to 3 or 4 projects a year, are selected in Western North Carolina, and there's really fierce competition amongst developers. It's a very complex process. When I say 3 to 4 projects, that could be to 55 plus, to workforce housing. It could be all workforce housing, all 55 plus. You just never know how it's going to fall, and it's extremely competitive. So one of the key components of what we do is going after gaining consensus with local leaders, stakeholders, and the community at large by engaging them early in the development process. We also offer community education. It's very important to note that LIHTC housing is not subsidized housing, nor is it Section 8 housing. And a lot of times we really have to kind of get folks beyond the thought of that. Topography of our most rural areas presents a challenge and can be often considered a difficult to develop area. So overcoming barriers, one of the ways to do it is identify and negotiate land costs very early in the process of development, purchase construction materials and store them to stave off further inflation when it's appropriate. And that's just something new we've never had to look at before. Obviously, establishing relationship with town leaders is critical. We've been able to secure land owned by the town and or county in several instances, including a tax credit award that we received last year in Valdez, North Carolina. Holding town meetings to engage and educate folks within the community about the project and why it is vital for their town and residents is definitely a best practice. Seeking other sources of soft financing to include charitable organizations, home funds that may be available through councils of government as well. Encourage towns to reduce their tap fees and other charges in support of affordable housing. Encourage towns that lack infrastructure to pursue funding through the Appalachian Regional Commission as a possible donation there, community development block grants, and charitable organizations. So creating a strong sense of community is really key. Establishing that sense of community is paramount for our residents. It enriches their daily lives. Thoughtfully selected amenities bring people together, whether it be a fitness center, computer center, community gardens, library and book lending, outdoor trails, multiple community gathering rooms, gazebos, grilling areas, and much more. Along with our residents, we plan and host special events, whether it be a potluck movie night, health and wellness presentation, cooking classes, study groups. There's ongoing active community engagement. So here's an example of one of our resident club rooms, and this is at Arbor Glen, the photo that we showed you earlier. We actually have 3 club rooms at this community because we had a floor plan that would accommodate that. Typically, we have at least one very large community room but often when we can, we'll add smaller little nooks. And this is, obviously a cozy area for our residents to gather. So our designs, we do employ universal design features, and we are built to standards that are often higher than market rate developments. As mentioned, our communities are indistinguishable from market rate multifamily housing. Interior amenities include luxury vinyl tile, solid wood cabinetry, large floor plans averaging 800 square feet under our new footprint for one bedroom, which is really a large one bedroom. Abundant closets, separate storage lockers, accessible bathrooms with grab bars and step-in shower, and extra large windows or balcony. Exteriors include thoughtfully selected architectural elements and designs that truly do enhance local surroundings. So here's a photo of one of our new footprints. We are branching out not only 55 plus, but also starting to build some workforce housing, as that is very much needed. And this is allowing us to create intergenerational living, as any of our workforce housing communities are absolutely going to have one bedrooms as part of the unit count. So we're very excited about this. Design is going to be built in Murphy next year. So thank you all.
Thank you, Joy. That was great. As you can tell, you now have another great resource to turn to, particularly having talked about some of the federal resources. Joy, you've given us a great perspective on what's available at the state level and examples of what to do in the community. And again, it sets up a good segue. Brian Beck, who's with the Appalachian Agency for Senior Citizens, is going to talk about a very specific example of work they're doing and making new homes out of older homes. Brian, welcome.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me. I do want to start. I think we had a short little video presentation of our, if that can be queued up first. Good. Thank you for showing that. I do want to let you all know that Regina Sayers, our executive director, is on the call, and she will be available for any questions you may have at the end. I just kind of wanted to give some insight into our project. It's a little bit smaller scale than some that you've heard about already, but it's kind of a use what you have approach. Regina and I have been here going on 11 and a half years now. And the previous director had determined that the future they wanted senior housing. It is located adjacent to our main office, so it borders our property here, and we are. As we came on, it was only a challenge, and it was thought of internally in our organization was, well, we're the managers of a trailer park, and that was all it was. We owned the land, still making payments on it. It was actually pretty much bought at a break even. So while there was a plan in place, it was very vague. And we wanted, at one point, we had a meeting. We met with some some people that were doing this kind of work out of Virginia Tech. And I would say that was our first aha moment. We had a meeting. They had shared what they were doing, rehabbing different locations, and they acted like they would love to have a trailer park. And we kind of told them, well, we have one, we'll give you. It wasn't anything that was we were tied to or was doing anything but creating challenges for us. But just the insight that they provided gave us that nudge that we did come back and we looked at it a little differently, and we started talking about it differently, and we started making acquisitions to the units in the park as they became available. We actually passed on a couple at the time in looking at some of the roadblocks and things. I think we had our own mental ones at the time. We wanted those that seemed like they would suit seniors, and we looked past the fact that some we could adapt them, and some would be transitional as well. But that was the first aha moment. Another was just internally in our organization talking about it and changing the name. I think one of the first things you see in the video was it is AASC's senior community. Long before that sign was there, we already started calling it our senior community, and that alone changed our course, and it allowed us to talk internally about what we wanted out there, what it would do for staff to be able to provide services to seniors and be able to walk from our main office. But it also just changed a little bit of an internal culture, going from we're trailer park managers to we're operating a senior community while it's in a state of transition. Just that initial step was very beneficial to our organization. Again, it was a use what you have approach. You can see in that video lots of long ramps and decks and platforms that extend the entire length of a few trailers. And what happened there was we have worked with the building inspector and an architect, and we now have an approved plan to take a single wide trailer, add a firewall. So we add firewall underneath the existing flooring down to a cinder block base, and separate the building in half, and add the firewall and have a duplex. So we have two egress, two doorways to enter each side of a single wide trailer, and we have two efficiency studio type apartments. Now, the ones that have really worked for this, we have looked for those that have more of a central kitchen and dining living space, and then a 2-bedroom, 2-bath with the bedroom and bathroom being on each end. Those have been more conducive to doing that. Another step that added in making that a possibility for us is we did take on an employee. He had a significant amount of experience in home building and home remodeling, and we assisted him in getting his Class C contractor's license. And we now have a contractor, and he has a handful of staff that work with him to rehab these and to build these going forward. We are days away from completing what is our second one, with already have one on site for our third single wide duplex trailer. We do have a range in our park of owned trailers from 1995 up through, I think we own a 2012 or 13 model. There is still some lot lease options out there, and the total park was only built to hold about 35 37 total units. And at some point, we probably will be back to that, with a good portion of those being duplexes. Again, land below that is available, and vacant land that we could continue to add if we wanted. But we have attempted to have community garden space and those types of things available as well. Again, only talking about what we have done and some of the things that have already come up in some of the others. We've had some 3-bedroom units, and we've pushed for cohabitation, and seen that in rural Appalachia is not generally accepted. So the duplex, again, was kind of pushed in our direction more than we may have thought we invented it. We just do not see a whole lot of opportunities for cohabitation. Now, there is a couple of caregiver and those types of settings that we have invited to the community, but there has not been a whole lot of use for a 3-bedroom single wide trailer when a lot of the seniors we're serving are single. Again, all of those,
I could just ask you to pause there. I hate to play traffic cop here, but we have a couple of questions that we want to come back to you in the Q&A. So if you'll let us pause a minute for you, if you'll stay with us,
okay.
A couple of specific questions in Q&A. And at this time, we want to and thank you and Regina. And we move on to our final presenter, Richard Duncan, who is Executive Director of the R.L. Mace Universal Design Institute. And we wanted to be sure to include this element as we talk about affordable housing, that it's also important to talk about accessibility for our senior citizens and others with some disabilities. And it's an important component. And Richard, we're pleased to have you with us and look forward to hearing what you have to share.
Thank you so much. After listening to the other panelists, I feel like we have a lot of conversations we can follow up on, particularly
Absolutely.
Brian, and talking about your housing options. I'll see if I can get this set up correctly. Just briefly, we're a nonprofit based in Asheville. Hope that's coming up for you all. Can you see that? And we spend an awful lot of our time working in the areas of accessibly designed housing, universally designed housing, age-friendly housing of all kinds. And so that's going to be the basis for my conversation. But pardon me, in thinking and listening to the other panelists, it seems that if I was to retitle this section, I would probably title it Timing and Options. And you'll see why in a couple of minutes. I'll see if I could step through these quickly so as to not use up too much time. I'll just remind folks what everybody knows to start out, that older adults live everywhere and in every kind of housing, whether it's older, single family, smaller homes, the ubiquitous ranch style homes, which seem to be everywhere in my world anyway, certainly North Carolina. And certainly in 2-story homes, be they single family, duplexes or triplexes. And Brian, again, I love duplexes and triplexes as options for a lot of folks. Certainly not in the 2-story model if they're too small in the footprint. But I love that as an option for more affordability. And then also the whole mountain cabin, which is certainly the case for a lot of folks. And the issue is, of course, that all of these homes, the vast majority of them, really don't work very well for us as we grow older. And we find that out sooner or later, that without making changes, we can't live safely or independently in them. We call these houses sometimes Peter Pan homes, homes built as if we never grew old and never aged. It still is the case way too often in what's being built new these days. So it doesn't matter what your household composition, if it's all older adults, if it's multi-generational families, we actually love that as a housing model for folks who can make that happen for them with all the benefits that accrue from there. Or if you're a household of beautiful models that have been selected for photographs, everybody's aging in houses that very likely weren't built for their aging selves. And that's the problem that we confront ourselves with. What happens, of course, is that prematurely, because of the home's design, we find ourselves living smaller and smaller and more dangerous lives, whether it's getting in and out of the house, whether it's bathing, basic activities, right? We rely more and more on others for these basic activities as well, all made worse by the design of the homes, which were designed for a younger generation. When we talk about age-friendly housing, it covers a lot of territory, all these different areas within homes and housing. If we're lucky, we can get to one or two of them. Usually it starts with entrances, and maybe we can get into bathrooms if we're fortunate. All these others need comprehensive treatment to make our homes age-friendly and to maintain them in an age-friendly manner. And I think I'll top you, Brian, with this slide. This is our granddaddy of all slides. This is the longest ramp I think I've ever seen. This is actually Western North Carolina, where someone built this. I don't remember who built it. I don't think this was our project, but we've done a lot of ramps in North Carolina. But this really exemplifies, as did some of the slides we've seen with some of the other speakers, the bind that people are in. We don't plan in advance for our aging selves. We don't plan for our kind of housing retirements. For a lot of us, our options are constrained or feel constrained. And so maybe a year or 5 or 10 years after the fact, someone builds a ramp like this and then has to contend with the enormous problems of maintaining ramps like this, shoveling snow in the winter, the ice fall, and the dangerous elements of this for all of the ambulatory folks who are certainly using the ramp all the time. It really is a challenge for us if we're not planning ahead. We find ourselves resorting to solutions like this all too often. If you're lucky, you don't have quite so high a rise, and you can build a fully functional, sturdy ramp. How much better this might be if it was painted, but it causes problems, I think, in our mindset as we go through our lives and kind of avoid thinking about these issues, which surely will be coming, which we've seen all around us. Now, this slide is not to suggest that we can all afford this. It's clearly a much more expensive ramp and happens to be painted, which is a great thing to do for ramps anyway. And it was built to some terrific design standards with a couple of exceptions. But the notion I'm trying to introduce here is not that these are how we should build all of our ramps, because clearly that's not affordable for a lot of folks, but that the other ramps will go away as soon as the use of the occupancy changes in all likelihood. They're not going to be adding to the permanent infrastructure, more usable homes and housing to be lived in by anybody, much less our older adults. We need to contend with that as part of the mindset that contributes to our avoiding making these decisions and planning decisions going forward. This happens to be a renovation of a house that shows a different model that can still be used in existing homes, but even has more applicability for new home construction. Just a couple of stairs, and while the photographs don't really reveal this, this is really a dump truck model of how you build a step-free entrance into a house. You bring a load of fill in and you dump it down, you get a nice level pathway into the house. In this case, they added a porch roof over, which is really helpful for step-free entrances, so you don't get the water infiltration in there. Not all existing homes can have this happen. Some of them can. Really, for new construction, step-free entrances has to be kind of item number one. As you have and as you may have influence over funding decisions, how that gets spent towards new home construction of any kinds in your neighborhoods and your communities. This is the small scale, right? We talked about big stuff, ramps, step-free entrances, dump trucks full of fill. In this case, we've got a simple handrail going up a set of stairs, where, like so many other houses, it's a handrail, it's a guardrail masquerading as a handrail. This is actually pretty good compared to a lot of handrails that people are using. In this case, they've done a couple of interesting things. They've actually added a solar light here on the handrail and a solar light down there, which may not illuminate a whole lot, but is a lot better. But it's lived in and used by a 90-year-old. And the problem, of course, was that she couldn't use those stairs safely. We made all kinds of suggestions for her: lifts, ramps, seat lifts, all kinds of things. And this is what they could come up with that she would accept now, which is certainly an improved handrail situation on the stairs for her, hand-shaped handrails. Problem, of course, and this is the timing issue, this is 10 years after she needed it. She's 90. She needed this at 80 to make her stairs more safe to use and to cease limiting her ability to get in and out of her house. Now, frankly, she's probably got only months to use this before her condition is going to advance far enough where this is not going to be viable. Nice to have this, much better to plan as far ahead as possible to make the changes that we know are possible in these cases. Going into bathrooms, this is the only other area of the house I'm going to talk about. This is the standard 5x8 bath that almost all of us have. I've got one in my house. It's terrible for use by anybody. If you use a wheelchair, there's no space in there to use it to get in and out of the tub or to maneuver. There's no space next to the toilet to get at the mix valve. This is what most of us, and thankfully we don't all use wheelchairs. Most of us are ambulatory, but we're forced into this awkward position. 2 nights ago when my 4-year-old granddaughter was visiting, this was me, right? Wedging myself between the toilet and the tub, reaching over to this awkwardly placed mix valve to try and fix the water for her. Really a problem. We think that you could do better. And we know that a lot of you with your home repair programs are doing this. So this is the traditional before, the same kind of bathroom I showed you before with the tub in there, 5 foot by 8 foot, without changing the footprint. It's not just taking out the tub and adding back in a shower. It's adding back in a shower that might be deeper than the one you've got there if you've got the space. 30-inch deep showers, not so good. This shows a 36-inch deep shower, which you can squeeze into some of these tight spaces, that also offers you some maneuvering room if you've got equipment, and really a curbless shower completely, not just a step-in shower, but curbless, absolutely. And the last thing in terms of people's mindsets is the inhibition people have about adding these key features to their homes, ramps, showers, is grab bars. People hate grab bars. We can use better looking grab bars. We need to begin to get that mindset into people's minds, that you can have things that look better, that don't look quite so institutional as the things you've done before. I'm going to try to wrap this up quickly. So actions, it's really 2 steps. How can we get older adults to plan ahead for their retirement housing futures? And that's a challenge I'll put before all of you. And then finally, how can we expand the housing options? Not limit the kind of work that we do into the traditional silos of older adult housing, with home repair programs, as essential as they are, being a primary vehicle for doing this, because we know that they can only do so much and they're incomplete in many cases. But how do we work on new home construction of varying kinds, using the funding sources that may come into our communities, and making sure that when that's used for housing, that the housing is built in a way that's age friendly and that we know actually benefits people of all ages. The rest of my slides are really all about aging in community and resources such as the Home Fit Guide by AARP. And then here's the poll question, which says, is your current home accessible for people of all ages and modifications? 72% said no. I would say that's typical for around. So what we're talking about is how do we get us to make different choices earlier in our lives to avoid some of the unfortunate outcomes we come up with. So you can check all the resources at the end if the slideshow is being made available. Alan, back to you.
Thank you. That was great. I'm glad that the panelists couldn't vote, so I didn't have to embarrass myself that I would have been a no also. And I have to say that I love the creativity of some of the little simple things we can do to be attentive to making what we think of as just practical accessibility also look good and be comfortable and attractive too. So as you can tell, we could go all day long. This is amazing. Brian, since I cut you off, let's start the Q&A. A number of people continue to ask those questions about, particularly in mobile home situations, oftentimes you have the split ownership between the unit itself and the land. Could you come back and address that a little more? Still got you muted, I think.
Yeah, there we go.
There you go.
We are the landowner. We do own the land outright. And as we acquire the units, our goals really are to have a rental community. I know USDA and Housing Community Development kind of push ownership, but we see in our experience it more transitional. I mean, we do see a higher rate of turnover in the senior population. We might just be housing them for a few years as they go from between their home to an assisted living or a nursing facility. And that's the area that we want to provide and keep them in the community as long as we can with our with our modifications and home modifications in these units. And I also just because I had the floor, we have this one that's being complete in the next week, and somebody already wants half of it, and we don't even have cabinets on the walls. So I mean, while we don't have a long list that's a waiting list. We have not had any trouble, especially filling the duplexes. The 3 bedrooms create more problems for us to rent than the duplex trailers.
Well, I think you answered that question, Regina. We're glad to have you with us also. And someone was asking about your wait list and the desirability. Anything you'd like to add?
As Brian says, we don't have any problem with vacancies at the agency, at the senior living community. We actually have people calling us. We don't have a long wait list because we try to get them off as soon as possible. It is a lot of the housing is transitional for individuals before they, hopefully we keep them, as Brian says, in the community as long as possible before they do have to transition to institutions or other situations. So, but thank you.
It's good to have you. It's interesting that if you will take a moment to look in your chats while we're doing this, several people have asked for contacts, for an example of Joy, with your counterpart in Eastern North Carolina, perhaps, and also if there are similar organizations in Kentucky doing the work that you're doing at AASC. So if you don't mind, in the chat, if you would respond to those questions and let folks know. And I'd simply like to come back. We've got such an assembly of talent, and we've all been, I think, stimulated by each other. Anyone, going back to David or any of you panelists, observations that you made, things you might have learned or would like to emphasize? Oh, come on. I know your wheels are turning there. In particular, I thought it was interesting. Most of you have talked particularly about engaging outsiders. Brian, you talked about builders. I thought that was a really good idea that ties in with what Richard's doing with the design. Get the folks who are actually doing the work to engage in rethinking how we do things, and also engaging with our local leaders. David, we did talk about that a little bit, and the mayor touched on that. Any additional thoughts on that point too, about sometimes we find it easier, I think, to engage with the town council or county commission as opposed to being intimidated going to the state legislature or to Washington, but we can have a huge impact.
Yeah, so one resource that is coming up at the risk of self-promoting kind of thing is the National Rural Housing Conference. And at that event, which is every other year, there are a collection of folks like this from regions all across the country. They usually were there in person, right? We're doing it virtually. So if you'd like to hear out, put in chat there, you can find it right on the front of our website. This year, it's going to be a collection of folks where we're going to do all kinds of virtual settings where you can meet and have those conversations that that seem to be at the core of every one of our comments, right? That you can't do this alone. You can't do it with a single source of financing. You can't do it with a single source of construction or design. It's really collaborative. And so at this event, you'll find, hundreds of folks like ourselves who are doing the work. And then Secretary Fudge from HUD will be there. Secretary Vilsack from USDA will be there. A lot of speakers we're having come in to really focus on the geographic and racial diversity questions that I think all of us are grappling with and work hard to put at the front of our business. So show on up to the conference, get to meet some more folks and find direct sources to the resources you need.
That's great. We have another question about, are any of you familiar with what Leanne describes as the Golden Girls living situation, the matching seniors or matching other adults with college students, et cetera?
Alan, I'll answer that if that's all right. Our campus of our agency is very adjacent. We border our community college. So we have had that conversation with the president of the community college to address that question. Can we perhaps partner some of their students? And especially would like to look at individuals that are aging out of the foster program, because those individuals don't have sometimes housing, but they want to go on to college and everything. So of course, you know, we have to do things like background checks and all of that to make sure that we get the right fit. But we are and have been looking at that. We've studied that. I know that they do that. I think it's either in Sweden or Switzerland, where a lot of college students will live in. They basically, you know, are just companions. They really don't do personal care or anything like that, but they are companions, as they said, Golden Girls. We have tried, as Brian said, to have 2 or 3 of, we also have a PACE medical program, and had 2 or 3 of our PACE participants to live together, even though, because they will sometimes become friends in the adult day center. And it just has not, it just hasn't happened. They all are so engrossed or in their own I guess, living situations that it's real hard for them to do that. But we continue. It's just a matter of making inroads. But yes, those are obviously some wonderful opportunities out there, and not just in our area, but that could be something that could be replicated or duplicated, you know, all across the nation, really, and not just Virginia, North Carolina, and Tennessee, but everywhere.
Regina, that's a great way for us to wrap up, because I think what we're all feeling at this point is I hope that we've started a dialogue that will continue. I hope you've met some people, made some contacts today, and that most of you have come away with something you wanted to learn today. And I want to thank you. It's been a real reminder of how interrelated all of these different topics are. We're the 3rd session in our livability series, and I will note that one of our questions came up about public transportation as it relates to these types of housing alternatives. So that's a perfect segue to remind you that our 4th session will be coming up on December 3rd. And our guru for this Livable Appalachia series, Gil Penalosa, has wanted me to remind you of how vital transportation is as we look at these affordable and accessible housing options for our communities. So I hope you'll make plans to join us then. If you will, at the end of this, if you'll opt in for AARP emails, we'll keep you posted about that and other upcoming programs. And we would really appreciate it if you would take the survey that we'll follow up today, give us feedback, let us know what you learned, what you found valuable, and any suggestions you have to improve our programs. I hope that this will be the beginning of a long series of looks at how to make Appalachia more livable and better for all of us. Take care. Thanks to all of you who participated today. You were great. And we'll look forward to seeing you on December 3rd.
Thank you.
Thanks.